think so.
Awesome. Hello, everybody. So happy to be here today for this LinkedIn Live with my awesome colleague all the way from Melbourne, Rogarel. And we're talking about from stuck to started, making change happen when nothing moves. There are so many hidden blockers actually that really stop teams from making that very first move. And Ro and I have, of course, been coaching and training teams to, in any part of the organization, be it marketing, leadership, on the ground, development teams, whatever. And change isn't getting stuck for them because of resistance. We see some different aspects. Change, maybe it's unclear, maybe it's what do you say? Waiting for the right time. They don't have clarity. Loads of reasons, right? And Ro and I definitely want to unpack these and many more of these, as many as we can in the next 20 minutes, and hopefully come up with some practical tools and techniques also for you to take back and experiment. So, hello, everybody. I'm Sarika Karbanda. I'm a catalyst. I accelerate management to go from good to great to Euro.
Hi, I'm Ro, and I'm actually in Perth, Western Australia.
Oh, sorry.
It's on
Melbourne.
the west coast. I'm a Westie.
Coffee was on my mind. Sorry.
So I am a change leadership coach and team coach, and also an author. So I've written a few books around coaching and talent management, which is one of my areas of interest as well. So getting unstuck is part of what we do as coaches as well, helping people get unstuck and understanding why they get stuck. So yeah, this is going to be a great conversation today.
Oh, and I must already say one sideliner, right? So yes, her books are great. Please read them. I've read two of them at least, so that's awesome. Okay.
Thank you.
Uh, so diving right in, right? The first or the two halves of today's conversation. I think the first half that we want to talk about is by starting off with why is change getting stuck, and the fact that, even if people nod their head, agree, and I'm not just saying it's the development teams on the ground, it's leadership teams, management teams, any teams. We're seeing people nod their head, agree, and a lot of people assuming it's resistance, but you and I both know there are lots of reasons why it's getting stuck. So maybe, let's get you started on with that and I'll keep pitching in.
Yeah, so I've been thinking about some examples in my career of where I've seen change get stuck. And I was thinking of one particular example this morning, as I was getting ready for another call. And I was thinking, what was it that actually got the organization stuck and what got it unstuck? And I think at the time it was a big program, a global program. And the thing that was interesting was the leadership team's response to the edict, if you like, from central office.
Hmm.
And it was kind of, if we sort of nod in agreement that we're going to be doing this, but actually, because we're so far away, we'll just continue with what we do. It's kind of, it wasn't sticking their head in the sand as such. It was kind of, you know, we've got other things to do. So for us, it's not important, but we do acknowledge that for you it is, kind of thing. So because of that, the organization didn't actually move forward at all with any of the things that we were meant to move forward with. And it was only when I think it was three members of the leadership team, or certainly two members of the leadership team, moved on, and we got a new head of the leadership team and another key member of the team join us. So I'm trying to anonymize it a bit, and then they were brought in specifically with the goal of making this change happen. So I was listening to Jason's conversation with Don Gray on the podcast, that change show this morning, and they were looking at Satir's sort of, and it's a model of change, and she talks about a foreign element. The foreign element needs to be strong enough. So if I relate that back to the example that I was thinking of, the foreign element was actually change in the leadership team. It was kind of what I call a pattern interrupt, that they've been, the organization had been going along, it was in its comfort zone. There wasn't enough of a jolt or a foreign element for them to actually do the change. It was only when something dramatic happened that suddenly the change got sort of momentum. So yes, that I don't know if that resonates with you at all, but that was the one of the examples in my previous life that really stuck out in my mind.
Oh, definitely resonates, and I can assure you, I've seen I've seen those too. So for sure, um, I think it's. I mean, the whole satire model. I think that itself is so impactful, right? And if people haven't looked that up, it's the Virginia satire model. So we can definitely put a comment. So do go and look it up. This foreign element, I think it's important in different ways and different contexts. Of course, it's going to work differently, but
Mm.
that trigger that it gives for something to move is really critical, right? So yeah, I'm totally with you on that. I'll give it another perspective, and this was a very recent one where teams on the ground in one of the organizations I've been coaching around change, not necessarily just change, but yeah, a lot of other stuff. Again, now I'm anonymizing as just as much, not wanting to give too much of the organization itself. I don't know. Did you freeze or did I freeze? One of us
I
froze.
think I'm not sure. One of us froze, so I missed the. Yeah, I think it's my internet connection is unstable yet again. I apologize for that. So
Okay.
I missed the actual example that you were giving there, Sarika.
Okay, no, but okay, I just started. So let me say that again, just in case our audience also missed it. So one of the organizations that I've been working for in recent times, and without giving away too much about the organization, the change team that I'm working with, they have been going through a lot of misalignment, which started to look like resistance to some people. But digging deeper, and that's why I generally don't want to use the word resistance anytime because it's there, but not everything is resistance, right? So you've got to look beyond that. You've got to look under the surface. And what we did with some conversations, with some workshops, we reached to the point that, oh, looks like the message you have is fully misaligned from the message the others have. And there was no common ground for people to talk on. And that is why the message that is getting passed on from the leadership to the other teams is also different. And I think that again could get looked at as resistance, that these teams on the ground were resisting. But guess what? Having done a workshop, we were like, oh, the understanding is totally different, which means, and that also got us to figure out the leadership team themselves were not aligned on the actual message from above. So we were like, oh, it's like a cascaded misalignment. So something as important as that, but it looks only like, oh, the team on the ground doesn't want to execute it. But well, they're executing to the best of their understanding, but we're not seeing why that's happening the way it is. But what
Yeah.
can we do about it? Of course, we are happy to talk about that in tools and techniques, but this is one of the most recent change getting stuck example that I've been seeing. Um, Another one that I very recently saw, and I think that would be common for you too. What's in it for me? People just don't know what's in it for me, and then they just go silent. And I'm like, okay, now silence could mean anything, but it's not resistance, right? So you and I would actually end up asking questions, and we get more meat out of that conversation just to understand what's under the surface. And again, it goes back to what's under the surface of what we are seeing. So it's not pushback, but if someone wants more clarity on what's in it for them, and maybe they don't feel safe asking that, so we need to be able to unsurface that and then help them get unstuck, right? So these are the two immediate ones that are coming to my mind right now. Maybe something else popped up for you.
Yeah. So I'm going to pick up on that what's in it for me because I think sometimes that can then lead into a very transactional view of change.
Mm,
Sometimes there isn't something in it for you. So, let's think about some of the most one of, the prosaic change, let's use a nice word, prosaic change, like regulatory things. There might not be anything in it for you other than this then helps the organization remain compliant.
true.
So I think that sort of equation of saying what's in it for me, what's in it for you, can sometimes lead down the wrong path. It's more around, okay, so given that this is what the environment is asking us to do, how can we achieve that in a way that is going to be A, most effective, and B, it's kind of understanding um, the effect it's going to have on your day-to-day work. So you kind of want to get people to understand, okay, there will be changes. And I think sometimes we pussyfoot around the impact that it's going to have on people because we don't want to name it. I was talking to somebody recently and they were saying, oh, we don't want to talk about X, Y, and Z because we want to avoid that conversation. And it's kind of the opposite you need to do. Sometimes you have to name it. And as we know in coaching teams, the elephant in the room will always be there, regardless of whether you name it and talk about it, it's always there. So that was kind of what was coming up for me. And sometimes that's what gets change stuck as well, is that people don't want to actually confront the reality. They want to pretend something different and forget that people always know in the organization. People always know.
No, true. And I like what you said about the what's in it for me thing. So just for the others also, so you don't get confused. So I've had that challenge too. And I think what gets to people is not just what's in it for me, but it's just that they're just not clear. So even if it's compliance, just clarify it for them, right? And it's not about telling them, it's working with them to make them understand and also show them that, okay, this is something we're all going to have to do because it's compliance, right? It's not that it's going to get you to lose your job or whatever. So yeah, just make it clear. And then people get it. Otherwise, they're stuck. They're just going to hold back and not going to do anything. I'm like, okay, I don't get this. So I think that bringing that clarity in whatever way is so key. And yeah, I like what
Absolutely.
you said. Yeah.
So
Okay. I know.
it kind of goes back to, sorry, were you looking to see if we got any comments? Have we got any comments?
Yeah, I was just checking on that, but that screen passed away for me. So, but just go on. I'll take a peep into the comment.
So, where was I going to go with that? I was going to go somewhere around the problem. What's the problem we're trying to solve here? So often, when we get stuck with change, it's because we're not yet clear on what it is we're trying to solve. What's the problem we're trying to solve? And because of that, we probably have not taken into account all of the environmental factors around that problem.
Hmm.
So, like you say, just because people have gone silent, it doesn't mean that they're resisting. It might mean that that time of year is one of their busiest periods. Thinking about myself at the moment, I've got a really busy period where I'm developing workshops, I'm delivering workshops, I'm following my passion projects like these conversations, which I love. So, I'm not getting back to people, as you know, as quickly. But that doesn't mean that I'm not interested. It just means that I've got a lot of stuff on because I'm in a really busy period. And that's true in organizations as well. If you've got customers banging on the door, ringing on the phone, messaging you on the various million different apps that we've got that they can contact you on, then they don't have mental or physical bandwidth to cope with something else that's going on out here that doesn't affect them in the day to day. And as we know, the stuff that affects us immediately is where we put our attention, not the future stuff. It's the stuff that's affecting us today. So that was kind of what was coming up for me when you were saying that.
Yeah. So now that you mentioned this, I think I can add a few more things now. Just on this. I like this. This is always
Brilliant,
good, right?
brilliant. This is exactly why I love coaching.
So so adding more to that, I would say think about things like, in fact, that's because last year an organization reached out to me. Their change team is fatigued with change and change is not moving forward. They're just not able to do anything more. Guess what? Change fatigue is a thing. You're just continuously working with change. Your teams are tired. Yes, now you give them another change and they're just sitting. They're just tired. They just don't want to move. Sometimes that is a thing too. Think about it.
Yeah,
And it's not that, adding new motivators is going to fix that. There are different ways of, going around that. So help them. They're genuinely tired working with so much change. There's another team I'm working with, or another organization, another team. A lot of people were just stuck because they were making assumptions that somebody else is going to do this and not me. I'm like, did you even ask? So people just step out of a change meeting and they're like, it's not me to do this. Ro is going to do this. Sarika is not going to do this. So Sarika assumes Ro is going to do this. Well, Ro assumes Sarika is going to do this. So who's working on it, right? We make our assumptions. And another thing then that pops up in the same thing is sometimes, and goes also back to our BJ Fogg's model, right? It's the ability to
Yeah.
execute that change. And sometimes the ability and motivation, of course, but sometimes people might be motivated to do this, but they just don't have the ability. And maybe they don't feel safe speaking up and saying, hey, I don't know how to execute this change. Maybe I just don't feel safe saying that, or I don't
Yeah.
feel safe, or I don't have the budget to upskill myself and the organization doesn't want to put money into it. I don't know. Could be many of these, but the more we talk about this, the more, you unsurface and you're like, okay, what is it?
Yeah. Yeah. And what I love about what you say there, Sarika, is the fact that, we our role is to help the organization think so that they can surface assumptions, they can understand what's actually going on at a systemic level in the organization that is creating this stuckness. And
Yeah.
it could be simple things, it could be, intertwined, entangled things that are really difficult to resolve. The key thing is not to make assumptions and not to go into that blame game, which is what we talked about earlier, isn't it? It's, and that I think is, keep it away from that transaction. It's of you versus us versus them versus we. It's about how can we as an organization work together and gain just enough alignment so that we can actually move things forward. And by the way, where are we moving to?
Hmm.
Are we clear where we're moving to? And why is that a good thing? So
Totally.
it's helping the organization have those kind of conversations, which sometimes they don't have this space to do that. And so that reflection piece that you've sort of hinted at there, sometimes the organization just needs to allow stuff to settle. And then once they've had chance to allow stuff to settle, to then work out, okay, what's our next first step? And I think we get into this productivity cycle. Everybody's talking about productivity. We need to be more, we need to do more with less, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, okay, well, that's why we've got technology. That's why we've got automations and things. But how's
Yeah.
that going at the moment? Because we seem to be working longer hours. So maybe we need to do a bit of thinking before we pile more stuff in there. Anyway, that's my thoughts. What does that ring any bells for you or
Totally, totally. Lots of bells actually. And I'm like, I think we can just go on with this half topic for the next 2 hours. We haven't even started with the tools and techniques, but I'm like, do we want to like just pause this one here and like just give a few insights? I know we are like just 2 minutes into it, but let's give it another 5-7 minutes or so, and then we start wrapping it up, and maybe
yeah,
just leave people with some tools and techniques. And if people enjoy that conversation and would like to know more, then we can do another one on exactly the same topic,
yeah,
do a
yeah,
detailed one, or maybe a webinar, or I don't know, workshop or
yeah.
something. Yeah. Okay.
Go
All
where
right.
the energy.
So, yeah, we just went on with the flow. So, but I'm going to pick on that and come up with the first practical tool and technique, and maybe I can give that a start, and then you go from there, because and goes back to the last thing I mentioned, right? The change fatigue. So one of the things that I urge organizations to do, of course, is not to do change over and above working hours. Because if you look at change as something you can put on top of your daily thing, that's the wrong way of looking at change. Change is what you're doing. Change is what you're working on. So it's not something that you have to do in addition to your BAU. Then there's something wrong in how you are looking at work itself. So
Yeah,
I would urge people to rethink what change looks like. Don't add it. So couple of pointers there. So don't add that over and above your regular working hours, because that's going to lead to change fatigue in some way. People might quit. I mean, there's so many consequences, intended, unintended. So that's the other thing. Don't add change over and above. And I think if you feel the change fatigue already, I would say just give yourself a breathing space.
Yeah.
Pause, observe what's happening around you, take a break. It's the least you could do. I mean, of course, there are other tools and techniques, but I thought I'll just start with this and throw it back to you. The ball's yours. Go for a couple of ideas and then.
And I'm going to juggle with that ball and throw in a behavioral science concept. So we know in lean change we talk about experimentation, and in behavioral science there is a framework called the Make It Easy or EAST framework. So easy is obviously the E part of the framework, and what that means is it means looking at the environment in which the change is happening. So how can we help people by taking away that need for any cognitive load? How can we change the environment that makes it easier for people to do the change? And there are some really brilliant resources out there around how you can do that. And I'm just going to give a simple one that, because I am a bit of a geek and I love looking for these in the outside world. And I went to Japan so I've been to Japan recently, but back in 2019, one of the things I really liked in Japan was how they use behavioral science to guide you when you were in places like the airport. So on the floor, you had different coloured carpet. So if you were transferring to an international flight, you followed the green, let's say, carpet. And if you were going domestic, you followed the yellow carpet. So that was a really nice, because when you're traveling and jet lagged, your brain just goes to mush. And I really like that because it was a huge floor. So, of course, you're not going to miss that. And then that kind of continued as we went through Japan. So brilliant on the steps going up to the overhead trains. They had the calories per step that you would use if you used the stairs versus the escalator. So the escalator was next to the stairs. So you could make a choice if you wanted to go on the escalator. If you were conscious about getting your steps in, which I am, then it gave you that sort of cognitive bypass that you could actually just see very quickly what those calories exerted were if you use the stairs. And so it's applying that kind of thinking to organizational change so that you make it easy for people so they don't have to have this cognitive overload. So I'm throwing the ball back to you now.
There. And and you just reminded me of the make change easy thing, reminds me always of this one YouTube video that I use in all my change workshops. And for people listening, you are welcome to use that. It's a sponsored video by Volkswagen, I think, and it's the Fun Theory. And it was done at the Oden, what's the name of the station there in Sweden. It was done as an experiment. And they actually made, so you've got stairs and you've got the escalator. Obviously, you see a lot of people using the escalator. Now, how do you get people to use the stairs? That was the question, right? And what really happened is that with this small change that they made, more than 60% of people who by default would use the escalator now started using the stairs. Of course, we are discounting of people who have physical challenges, who have to use the escalator. So leave that aside. But those who didn't really need to use the escalator were also using it, right? So 60% plus started using the stairs. Why? Well, they made it easy and fun. Why? They made the stairs look like a piano. So, and actually it, so people started jumping on it, playing the piano like it was. Children started enjoying it. They didn't want to use the escalator anymore. It's just making change easy for people. So thank you for that reminder. And people, if you want to look up that video and just, give it a fun way of looking at change. I think the question I get in my workshops is, can you make organizational change that fun? I think it's your definition of fun. You want to revisit that. Yes, you can make it fun. And I think if you co-create change, you can always make it fun. But if you're imposing it, then it's not fun at all. It's like, oh my God, she's telling me to do the change, right? You're never going to do it. I wouldn't do it. So, and you mentioned environment. So there's one thing that and that's why I made that point, goes back again to the BJ Fogg approach to do things, but it's about removing those obstacles, right? By linking it back. A lot of times people make the mistake of adding in more motivators. The environment doesn't necessarily need more motivators. It needs you to remove the friction, remove the obstacles, remove what's stopping people from going forward. If it's upskilling people, do that. If it's making the stairs look like a piano, do that, whatever it is, whatever it takes. So I just wanted to add that one piece. Yeah, let me throw the ball back. One more.
Catch. So yeah, so a very easy example of that particular one is I'm not an IT person, but I've spent most of my career in IT and telecoms. And things like you switch off an application at a certain date. So it means that people can't go back. Obviously, you do have a way of going back just in case it doesn't work. But you basically say to people, right, the application will be switched off by a certain date. And in fact, Microsoft are doing a very similar thing with their Windows 10.
Hmm.
So in October, my Surface Pro will no longer be supported through Windows 10, so I'm going to have to buy a new computer. Maybe not a great example, but that's kind of they're kind of forcing you through the environmental change to
Yeah.
take an action. So that's I was just thinking of that from my previous life, thinking, yeah, we used to do that, turning things off by a certain date. So you'd have a transition period where both systems would be operating or both apps would be operating in today's parlance. And then basically after a certain cutoff date, the other one would be closed. So yeah, and it's interesting because you will still get people who don't know about it, who will come to you, but it's probably maybe 10%. So it means that 90% of people are now using the new system. So it's kind of, again, how much alignment, how much unstuckness do you need in the organization to move the change forward? And I think if you're aiming to get everybody doing it all the time, then that's probably why you may be feeling a bit that you haven't succeeded with the change. It's kind of understanding, okay, there will always be outliers. What is an acceptable amount of outliers that you will tolerate in this particular project?
I like that. Yeah.
Ball back to you.
Ah, okay. Just taken, I was thinking, yeah, because there's a lot of what you said that we're seeing now, because obviously it's linked to behavior, right? You don't want people to fall back into the old habits. So that's like a simple thing to do. Okay, this is still going to be live, but now we're going to take this out totally so you don't have the opportunity of going back into that old habit. So that's a good link. Yeah. And I see a lot of that happening too, which is good.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know we're done with time. Do I want to give another one? Maybe we'll do one more, one each. Okay. What do you
Go
say?
for it. Go
Okay.
first.
So a very quick one would be, and I'm always inspired by David Markey because his point always is, move the ownership to where the responsibility lies, right? Oh, move it all the way there. So people, of course, he talks about it in terms of delegation and whatnot. I'm using that concept in most of my change meetings. I say most because sometimes it just gets, a little bit of time to get to that point of most.
Yeah.
So let's say 95% of my change meetings with the teams that I coach, one thing I get them to do at the end of every meeting so that people don't feel lost or don't feel they have nothing to do or make assumptions is ask one simple question. What is your next step or what's your next action immediately after this meeting? What are you going to go out and do? And get everybody to do that, right? So, Ro, what are you going to do next after this session is done? And Ro would be like, yeah, I think I'm going to summarize it more with Sarika. I'm going to do, but there will be something Ro would say. And then Sarika would say something. And then somebody else would say something. That for me automatically transfers ownership because now they're saying it. So there's that link and ownership that comes from each person. Okay, this is what I want to do. And if there are any assumptions that are unvalidated, they will come out there at that table, right? Which is nice.
Yeah.
So I think that's a very small nuance, but a very powerful nuance that shifts ownership to the people who are working with the change. And I think they take it well that way. So that's
Yeah.
from me. And one final to you.
That is so weird because I finished my workshop yesterday with that question, but it was also a fun question to get people to share what they were going to do next after the course because it was quite late in the day. So it was just way to end the session. So it's weird that you said that today. It's like, oh, you must have been listening. So I guess it's kind of that behavioral science piece again. So there is an awesome academic called Dr. Robert Cialdini, and he came up with the science of persuasion. And there are 6 factors in the science of persuasion. And one of them, which you just mentioned there, is social proofing. And there are lots of different tools and techniques you can use that will kind of help you. If change is stuck, it will help you get the change moving. And things like getting people in public meetings to voice what it is they're committing to. Because if they voice it, then they made a public commitment to it. Getting people to raise hands. So you might have been to workshops and things or seminars. Some people overuse this, I have to say. So I would say treat it with the respect it deserves, but get people, how many people are going to take whatever action is that you've talked about in the meeting? How many people, at 10 out of 10, they're definitely going to take the action. And you'll see, and you might actually see one hand. So it's that lone nut, isn't it? And then it's like, well, that's interesting because who's going to take no action? So it's using the social, I mean, obviously you don't want people not to take action, but at least then you get a good sort of feel for what's actually happening in the room. So using our understanding of how we as group animals, we like being in social groupings, use that knowledge about our own psychology to actually A, help you understand what might be happening with the change, and B, test out strategies for how you might use that to create that sort of little bit of grit in the oyster that then starts the creation of the pearl. And you just need a few people to do things, to get things moving, to then get a bit of momentum. So yeah, that would be my thing, is go back to the social sciences, understand the influence factors, and then work out experiments that you could do that would help you create that little bit of momentum.
Awesome. I totally love that. And people, I mean, Ro and I can go on and on and on. I think we have loads and tons of examples, a lot of them which we're like literally thinking on our feet right now. And I think we just, compounding on each other's points here. I'm sure we can do lots of them. But here's the thing, we've already crossed all time limits for today. It's already more than 30 minutes, but okay, give this LinkedIn Live a listen if you haven't been on the call today. And we didn't get an opportunity to look at the questions. We did peep in once, but we didn't find anything. But if there are questions, feel free to put them in the comments or just DM Ro or me, and we will, of course, get back to you. Anything, just put it in the comments. And if you already have, we will, of course, respond to it at some point in the day as soon as we have some brain space to do so. Yeah, we're just hopeful that today's session got you a little bit unstuck, gave you some ideas of how you could maybe experiment with something to get you or your teams unstuck. And if you still have something nudging you, ping us and we'll be happy to take it up.
Brilliant. Yeah.